Today's program of Cape Cod Arts with John Murrell is being brought to you by In a Sentimental Mood. John Murrell sings the songs of Duke Ellington, accompanied by Boston pianist William Merrill and pre-concert lecture by Mick Carlin. The performance is Sunday, November 13th at 3 p.m. at the historic West Falmouth Library. For more information, please call 508-548-4709. In a Sentimental Mood, the songs of Duke Ellington. Thank you for watching Cape Cod Arts with John Murrell. Our program is a look at the art scene on Cape Cod from Falmouth and Bourne all the way down to Wellfleet, Truro, and Provincetown. Today, my review will be Jazzing with John Pizzarelli. John Pizzarelli and his trio and the Cape Cod Symphony. The interview will be notable author Mick Carlin. And now, my suggestions for some upcoming events. First of all, I would like you to consider going to the Tilden Arts Center at the Cape Cod Community College and seeing a production of Puccini's Tosca, presented by Opera New England of Cape Cod. These are fully staged professional productions with full orchestra, and as you probably know, Tosca is one of the great operas. It will be performed Friday evening, October 28th at 7 p.m. Earlier this week, I had the fortune of driving into Boston to the Museum of Fine Arts and seeing a spectacular new exhibit. I was alerted to the exhibit by an article that Debbie Foreman wrote in the Cape Cod Times. It is by the painter Degas, and it was called Degas and the Nude. And it was an exhibit of all spectacular nudes that Degas painted from mid-1880s through about 1900s. And it's one of those exhibits I absolutely love. It's an in-depth exhibit. However, it only takes about an hour and 10 minutes. And for any museum, that's about all I want to do. Another performance that I would like to interest you in seeing is a concert that I myself will be performing in. It is called In a Sentimental Mood, the Songs of Duke Ellington. I'll be joined by Boston pianist William Merrill, and our guest interview today, Mick Carlin, will be giving an in-depth lecture, pre-concert lecture, on the songs and the music of Duke Ellington. I'll be performing it at the West Falmouth Library, November 13th at 3 p.m. I highly recommend it. Recently, I went to the Cahoon Museum of Art, and I saw an exhibit called Celebration of Life, 19th Century Change in Interpretation of Death. This small, charming museum had that exhibit in addition to 2 or 3 others, and I highly recommend giving it a try. These are my picks for the month. Thank you. So my review for today, Jazzing with John Pizzarelli, a fresh spin at classic favorites. I have to say it was a pretty spectacular performance. But when I consider John Pizzarelli and his incredible trio performing on Cape, I must admit it's a stretch to ponder them sharing the stage with the Cape Cod Symphony. Both, of course, are well respected and accomplished, but each has their own repertoire and style. I did go to the performance with an open mind, and I'm happy to report that this unconventional union created a lovely affair for all who attended. The program opened with the ballet music from Rodgers and Hart's Broadway musical called On Your Toes. The ballet is called Slaughter on 10th Avenue. This tone poem was arranged by legendary Broadway orchestrator Hans Spilek. Shifts from one intriguing melody to the next. This 1936 composition premiered on Broadway 8 years after George Gershwin's American in Paris. My question is, where are all these splendidly beautiful melodies on Broadway today? Now, enter John Pizzarelli. This lovable guy has charm and warmth and humor. He invites the audience to come right on the stage with him. He has crafted himself a career that has name recognition usually afforded to singers. Now, how many jazz guitarists can you name besides B.B. King and perhaps his father, Bucky Pizzarelli? Mr. Pizzarelli is not only a seasoned entertainer who jokes with us between the musical offerings, but is a passionate and highly inventive guitarist. He brought a program of familiar tunes. His arrangements were full of surprises, which could entertain both the novice and the long-time listener. A highlight of the first half of the program was when he paired Rodgers and Hammerstein's You've Got to Be Carefully Taught from South Pacific with Stephen Sondheim's Children Will Listen from In the Woods. Mr. Pizzarelli's simple and sincere singing was enhanced by the pairing of the two melodies. At the beginning of the second half, the Cape Cod Symphony began with a Duke Ellington tribute. There he is again, the Duke, with a melody of his hits. Oboist Betsy Doris played the classic, sophisticated melody splendidly. John Pizzarelli Quartet followed with more Ellington tunes. Now, I have to say the Cape Cod Symphony is one of the biggest arts organizations on the Cape, with its both classic and pop series. And I think it's time that the Symphony has a proper performance venue. As serviceable as the Barnstable High School Auditorium is for orchestra and its audience, it's not a fitting place for such highly respected musicians. The acoustics do not complement the excellence of the players, and it certainly does not have the elegance of Boston Symphony Hall. Now, the performance was concluded with a tribute by Benny Goodman, or a tribute of Benny Goodman. A highlight was the extended drum solo by Tony Tedesco. He brought an outburst of excitement from the audience. Now, let me say, alone, completely alone, John Pizzarelli could entertain as a charismatic performer. But include his trio and the fabulous Cape Symphony, the performance became memorable and a joyous reception for our American music. It was a great concert. I would like to introduce my guest for today's program. His name is Mick Carlin, and he lives in Centerville, Massachusetts. He is a middle school English teacher and an author. He's recently finished a book called Riding the Duke's Train, the Duke being Duke Ellington. This is a book that I just finished reading, and it's fascinating. Let me explain. First of all, it's designed for younger people, probably middle school and high school students. And it's about Danny, a 9-year-old boy who's an orphan. And he jumps on a train that happens to be the train in which Duke Ellington and his famous band was riding in. And he was taken under the wing by Duke Ellington and explores the world of jazz through the eyes of Duke Ellington and his band. What's fascinating about this fictional novel is that all the information, all the facts about Duke Ellington and his various band members are factually true. Mr. Carlin took the time and the interest to make sure that all the details were exact. So when they said they were in Germany in 1939, they were in Germany in 1939, or whenever. And the reviews have been spectacular. Mick is a fascinatingly energetic guy, and his book, produced by or published by Leapfrog Press, will be out in January of 2012. I'd like to introduce Mick Carlin. So Mick, this is so exciting that you're here.
Thank you, John.
Because as you know, and most of the audience knows, I have a program of songs of Duke Ellington coming up.
And I'm honored that you asked me to introduce it.
And, you know, we tried to do this a couple times, and you wrote a book on Duke Ellington.
I did.
And before I talk about it, I have to say I read it and I loved it. I don't do too much reading, but I read it and I loved it. Now, what prompted you to write this? And please tell me, or tell the audience, you know, why this is a little different.
Okay. Around 1998, I figured, I like to write, I love jazz, I'm a teacher of young people, let's bring the two together. But writing a novel, that was a daunting idea. So what I thought I'd do is I would write what they call in the industry a text-heavy picture book.
Right.
Not like, you know, hop on pop with a couple of lines, but maybe a whole page of writing with an illustration on the next page.
Good.
And then maybe there'd be 2 pages of writing, but then 2 pages of illustrations. So the first version of that was 14 pages, single-spaced. It was meant to be a text-heavy picture book, and it was narrated in the third person. So I'm done with it, and I figure, well, what can I do with it? Well, I've always admired the writing of Nat Hentoff, the great jazz critic. He's also a warrior for the First Amendment. And he writes a column for Jazz Time. So I wrote a cover letter, I put the manuscript in the mail, sent it off to Nat Hentoff, care of Jazz Times, not really expecting much. About 3 weeks later, I get a phone call from Nat Hentoff, and the first thing he says, before he even says, this is Nat Hentoff, he says, "Did you know Duke Ellington?" And I said, "No, I was 15 when he died."
Oh, that's so great.
He said, "Because I knew him for 25 years. He was my mentor. And the way you've captured him in your story is the way he was in life," which are sweet words to hear. And he says, "We're going to find a publisher. We are going to find a publisher." So, you know, I'm having little dances of sugar plums in my head. I'm picturing paying off the mortgage. He kind of opened the door to several editors who liked it, but they all said the same thing. It needs to be expanded into a novel. And at the time, to me, that was like jumping from here to Venus. I just had no idea how to do it. So I thought, well, I'll put it away for a little bit. Then in the meantime, I wrote a young adult novel about Louis Armstrong. And while I was shopping that around, 2 summers ago, the summer of '09, I came back to my manuscript, and I suddenly had an idea how to expand it. In the original version, it ends with Duke and the boy, his name is Danny, arriving in Harlem. I thought, expand it to having the band go to Europe in the spring of '39, which they did. And for a while, they got held up in Nazi Germany. Not quite as outrageously as I put in the novel, but they were held up. Then I had an idea, because I thought the writing was rather sterile, to use a first-person narrator and have the voice of a 10-year-old boy, which as a writer really freed me up. I could hear the boy's voice in my head. And basically, the summer of '09, I wrote every day pretty religiously for about 3 to 4 hours a day, 7 days a week. At the end of the summer, I had a manuscript. I had no idea how good or bad it was. I let it lie around for about a month, and then I went back to it to revise, and I was quite surprised to find that I liked mostly what I had written. And to answer your question, I just feel that Duke Ellington is such an outstanding American artist. I feel he's quite possibly America's greatest composer. And also as a human being, his life was so exemplary that it's something that young people would enjoy if they discover him as a musician, as a composer, and as a human being.
Can you tell me quickly what the story is about?
It's about a 10-year-old boy named Danny. He's been recently orphaned. He really doesn't know what to do. He's walking along some railroad tracks late at night in Georgia when up ahead there's a train which is stopped because a mother cow and the calf are asleep on the tracks and the engineer is trying to shoo them off. he notices that one of the doors of the train, it's a boxcar, is ajar. Figures, why not? Goes in, closes the door, the train takes off, he falls asleep. Turns out in the morning, it's the car that belongs to Duke Ellington and his famous orchestra. Duke actually did rent a Pullman car in the 30s whenever they went down south, and it was Duke's way of avoiding the indignities of Jim Crow.
Sure, I knew that, yeah. And this is the adventures of Danny?
Yeah, Danny basically is adopted by the band. He's a likable little lad, and he really has no family, nowhere to go, and for a while he sets up the drums of Sonny Greer, who's Duke's drummer. And then he has a dream to become a musician. But like a lot of people, our dreams don't always come true. I mean, when I was 12, I wanted to play shortstop for the Red Sox. And if you had told me when I was 12 that I didn't have the talent, I would have been very depressed. And Danny is a good musician, but he's not good enough to play with Duke Ellington and his orchestra. So Duke basically trains the young man to read music and copy music, and he becomes Duke's copyist. So when Duke composes a piece, Duke doesn't have to you know, copy over the music for the trombone section and the reed section. Danny does the work for him.
Wow.
And the story goes again from Georgia to Harlem and then all around the country. Then in the spring of '39, Ellington took his orchestra to Europe, and they toured Europe. As I said earlier, they were stranded in Nazi Germany, and that becomes really the climax of the novel.
Terrific. You know, probably everybody knows Ellington's name, but can you give me a few titles of songs that people might say, oh, he wrote that?
Yeah, well, he wrote over 2,000 pieces of music. I can't pretend that I know all 2,000, but I would say I know a good 1,200 pieces. I've been listening to him since I was a kid, really. My father was an Ellington fan. We all know Take the A Train, which, you probably know this, was not written by Duke, but written by Billy Strayhorn.
Made famous by Ellington's band.
Made, of course. But Billy Strayhorn was an amazing composer in his own right. He joined the Ellington Orchestra in '39, and it was almost like you had Ellington as the Babe Ruth of jazz composition, inviting, you know, the Ty Cobb, using baseball analogy, of composition into his band, because Billy Strayhorn, in my humble opinion, is one of the finest American composers of the 20th century as well.
Didn't he give Ellington sort of the background and orchestration and sort of a classical approach that Ellington may not have, because he wasn't schooled, he wasn't trained.
No. Duke Ellington was self-taught. He picked up things from pool hall piano players. There was one composer, Will Marion Cook, and he and Duke would take taxi rides through Central Park in the mid-20s, and Will Marion Cook would give Duke Ellington these impromptu lessons on harmony. But you're right, Billy Strayhorn was a classically trained pianist. He was very interested in, do you pronounce it Debussy?
Debussy.
Yep.
Debussy.
So he had the background in classical composition that Duke did not have, and it was a beautiful meeting of musical minds, the two of them. But to answer your question, so of course, Take the A Train.
Sophisticated Lady.
Sophisticated Lady.
I Got It Bad, and that ain't good.
Solitude.
In a Sentimental Mood.
In a Sentimental Mood, that's a gorgeous piece. Black and Tan Fantasy, The Mooch.
Mood Indigo.
Mood Indigo,
So probably people know these titles.
Yes.
But what do you think about your readers? Your book is basically designed for middle school people?
I would say I'm aiming at maybe 5th, 6th, 7th grade, right in there.
Okay.
I'm not dumbing down the writing. I'm hoping that adults who are interested in Ellington will enjoy it, and I've been told by Ellington scholars that they have enjoyed it. But what I'm hoping with this book is that students open up their minds and their ears to Duke Ellington's music, because in my life, it's enriched my life. Eric Jackson has been the host of jazz on WGBH now for 30 years. His father, Sam Jackson, was a Boston radio pioneer. And Sam Jackson once said, Eric Jackson said this over the air, and I've never forgotten it. Sam Jackson said, if you do not have any Duke Ellington music in your home, then something is truly missing. And that's what I feel, that Duke Ellington's music brings such joy, such pleasure to a listener, that if I could make a generation or several generations of young people open up their minds to Ellington's music, then I will have done a good deed.
I think you will. You know, you probably know I'm a teacher. I'm a voice teacher. And younger people, you know, their world is very small compared to ours. And they feel, if they don't know it, it can't be worth anything.
Yes.
Like, oh, no, no, no. You know, when you introduce them to Rodgers and Hammerstein. But I have a feeling through this book, they will like, well, give it a try.
I'm hoping.
Now, Ellington, you really believe he's great?
Oh, without a doubt. Not
and
only
he should be like right up there with with Leonard Bernstein.
Oh, without a doubt.
And I always can't quite understand, you know, he wrote at the same time as all the boys in Broadway wrote. Rodgers and Hart, Jerome Kern, the Gershwin brothers, Cole Porter.
Right.
But he's never in that clique, is he?
No, I don't. You hit upon a good point. I think Duke was always trying to go for a Broadway hit. His dream was to have a show on Broadway.
Right.
And the closest he got was the Beggar's Opera in the late 40s. Beggar's Holiday, excuse me, which didn't last for that many.
111 performances.
Right.
Yeah.
But for me, I love Gershwin, I love Cole Porter, love it. But at the same time, Ellington was also an instrumental composer. And I think those gentlemen, well, with Gershwin as an exception, wrote songs, and they wrote incredible songs, the Great American Songbook. But Ellington also wrote what he called tone parallels, such as Black, Brown, and Beige in 1943, Harlem in 1950. Ellington was a composer of instrumental long-form pieces, in many ways not that much different than what Bach and Mozart and Beethoven were doing in their time. But I think what makes him truly great is that he wasn't just considered a second-class citizen. Being African-American, Duke Ellington, like Louis Armstrong, like Ella Fitzgerald, like Billie Holiday, this man was treated like a third-class citizen during his lifetime by his fellow Americans. There's a part in the book, I have it take place in Washington, but it actually took place in St. Louis. A white police officer said to Ellington, you know, Duke, you would have been a great musician if you'd been born white.
Right.
And Duke was famous for his cool. He was unflappable. And he just kind of looked at the white police officer and said, yeah, no doubt my life would have been different if I'd been born white. And then he walked away. And one of his musicians said, Duke, I wanted to punch that guy. And Ellington said, what would that have gotten you? In a jail cell for the next week. He said, no, I'll take my righteous anger and I'll write blues with it. So to me, not only a supreme artist and a creative genius of the first rank, but a man who lived in a society that was constantly trying to tell him that he was a third-class citizen inferior to other people. He knew the truth, but just the perseverance, not only of Duke, but of Billy Strayhorn and the whole orchestra in overcoming the racism of America in their lifetime.
Talking about that, I you know, just got into this. So the Cotton Club was which is where Duke basically learned his craft, right?
Yep.
1923,
It was
24?
December 4th, 1927, that Duke, his orchestra, premiered in the Cotton Club.
All black performers.
Yes. All black waiters. Everybody
except the audience was white.
Yes.
And that's where Cole Porter would go after a show.
Right. It was owned by Oni Madden, who was a gangster.
Gangsters.
Yeah, owned by a gangster. And the audience was white. Every now and again, somebody like Bill Bojangles Robinson would be allowed to have a table. But no, you're absolutely right. The musicians, the dancers, the wait staff, all African American, the audience was white.
So it'll be bizarre, you and I doing a concert together.
Yeah.
Because we just don't have the right skin pigment.
No, we don't. But we have the soul, though. We have the heart and the soul, John.
There's been incredible accolades. You know, your book has not come out yet, right?
It comes out in December if you want to buy it, either from Leapfrog, the publisher, online, if you want to buy it from, you know, Barnes & Noble online. It'll actually be in bookstores in mid-January, I think January 10th. But I never realized this. Even though a book comes out January 10th, you can get copies a month earlier in December through the publisher.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's been tremendous accolades. Is there any ones from anybody that has enjoyed your book that you remember that really has touched you?
The people who knew Ellington and who tell me that I've captured the man, that makes me feel very good. As I already mentioned, Nat Hentoff saying, I knew him for 25 years. The Ellington in your book is the man I knew.
Right.
Dan Morgenstern, who is in charge of the Jazz Institute studies at Rutgers University, he knew Ellington very well, and he said, yeah, you've captured the man. And Jack Bradley, who's a good friend of mine, he was Louis Armstrong's road manager and photographer. He lives in Harwich. He was at every single one of Duke's New York City recording sessions in the 60s, knew him well, and he said, you know, this is the man. He was mysterioso. Duke Ellington was a man who would make eye contact, talk to you, remember your name. He loved to shoot craps with custodians backstage after a show. He'd always give back the money he'd won. But in the middle of shooting craps, he'd say, hey, by the way, Joe, what's your birthday? And Joe would say, oh, I was born December 3rd. And Duke would make a little mental note. And then Duke would say, what's your address, by the way? And he'd write down the address. And these people would get birthday cards from Duke Ellington from wherever he was around the world. So we had the common touch. From what I've read about the man, he truly didn't have a snobby bone in his body, but he did know his own worth as an artist. And even his own son said there was always a little bit of a veil there and almost a layer of cool. And he was friendly, he was generous, but you could never get beyond that little bit of protective armor, veneer, yes. And I think it was his way maybe of protecting his creative being from the outside world.
Yeah. Only today do we want to know everything about our artists. You know, in the old days we just enjoyed their music. But Mick, this has been great. I know we could talk and we might have you on again.
Okay.
Is there another book in your future?
Yes, the novel that I mentioned, Little Fred and Louie, it's about a young man's friendship with Louis Armstrong. That's going to be published by Leapfrog Press December of 2012.
Wow.
So I'm very excited about that as well. It's all done, all done.
Yeah.
Brian Morton is a well-known Scottish writer. He wrote the Penguin Guide to Jazz, which is the Bible of jazz CDs. It's in alphabetical order. You get your jazz CD, you immediately look to see what Brian Morton said about it. He said in his humble opinion, he likes the Louis Armstrong novel even more than the Duke novel. But, you know, to me it's like saying, do you like your one daughter more than another? No,
sure,
you love both of them.
Yep.
But I am excited for the Louis Armstrong book to come out. I've had Jack Bradley reading it and giving me little hints here and there.
Who is Jack Bradley?
Oh, Jack Bradley was Louis's road manager.
Okay. In Harwich.
Yes.
Okay, good.
And he's telling me different things, how Louis relaxed at home and things of that nature. So again, I'm hoping that I've captured the real man. But the whole idea is to make young people want to seek out Duke Ellington's music, Louis Armstrong's music, and
or let's just say good music.
Good music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mick, thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
I'm glad you could be there. And you are going to be speaking on my concert on November 13th.
And I will be there on time.
And I bet you'll engage them as you are right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Take care, John.
Bye.
Bye.
So that's our program for today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I thought Mick Carlin was fabulous. And I hope you enjoyed my review of John Pizzarelli and the Cape Symphony. Now, do yourself a favor. Get out in your car and go see something. Go see a theater production, an art exhibit. Go see the symphony, a jazz production. There is so much happening on Cape Cod, and I promise you'll love it. Have a great night.